I'm going to present one of the key discussions and key votes that we will have at the board meeting, and that is the relationship that Jacob's Heart wishes to forge with the Children's Hospice and Palliative Care Coalition. As we plan for the next 3 years of our organization's growth and the impact that we'll be having, this is an important strategic decision that we need to make together as a board. So to start with, Jacob's Heart, as we know, our mission is to improve the quality of life for children with cancer and support their families in the challenges they face. The Children's Hospice and Palliative Care Coalition's core mission is to speak out on behalf of those too little or too sick to speak for themselves. Jacob's Heart provides direct services, direct emotional, practical, and financial support to families in a 4-county area: Santa Cruz, Monterey, South Santa Clara, and San Benito counties. Children's Hospice and Palliative Care Coalition works to open access to quality care for children with life-threatening conditions through a statewide effort, which includes education, advocacy, and leadership. So you can see that the mission and purpose of both of these organizations are concerned with the well-being, improving the quality of life and the quality of care for children, doing so in a different way. So now the question becomes shall we converge those, or shall we make them separate? That's what we'll be getting at, and I'll try to get to that in this PowerPoint presentation. Please write down your questions, bring things for discussion, because I'm sure there will be quite a few. So I want to give you just a little background of CHPCC, a little bit more details. So the mission statement is that Children's Hospice and Palliative Care Coalition is dedicated to improving children's access to community-based palliative and hospice care services through advocacy, program development, and education. That access to community-based palliative care services, that includes services like what Jacob's Heart provides. We are part of that continuum of palliative care. So towards this end, CHPCC advocates, initiates policies and programs that impact children's access to community-based healthcare services, how children get the services that they need. We establish forums for open, integrated discussions on issues that are relevant to seriously ill children and their families, provide opportunities for mutual learning. This is really important among providers, families, and other stakeholders. It's a lot of training and mutual learning for those who love and care for seriously ill children. CHPCC collects, develops, and shares best practices and initiates research in support of pediatric palliative care, creates innovative models which address the unique needs of children and their families. As we go through this, I'm going to talk about some of the initiatives that we did in the early days of CHPCC, creating an innovative model. One of those models was the palliative care waiver. And we used the service delivery model of Jacob's Heart as a way to frame the types of supportive services that families need going through the experience of a seriously ill child, the death of a child, and the bereavement services. So Jacob's Heart was used as a model of care. And the coalition gathers and shares stories that tell the human side of pediatric palliative care. I hope all of you had a chance to read the article that I wrote for the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization's journal this last year. And it was about a boy named Isaul who didn't have access to hospice. And his story, the tragedy of his inability to access care that he needed, one of our beloved early Jacob's Heart children, that sparked the idea and the need to work on regulation. And so throughout the years, this is just you can take your time and pause this. I'll send you the PowerPoint. These are the things that we accomplished over those years. In 2001, CHPCC was founded by me and Devin Dabbs. At that time, the Institute of Medicine had written their report that only 1% of the children who were eligible and needed hospice care in the end of their lives received it, and that there was a problem there. So we sought through all these years to address it. These are lists about how we formed a public policy committee, brought people together from different disciplines, the awards we won, the regional collaboratives we set up. I was involved at that time in all the regional collaboratives, but especially the Central California Collaborative. All of these things since have disbanded, and we're looking to reignite them. And then in 2006, you've all seen this bill on my wall in my office where we signed into law the Nix-No Children's Hospice and Palliative Care Act, Assembly Bill 1745, which opened access to pediatric services, community-based services for children with serious illnesses. And then we published a paper in the Journal of Maternal Child Nursing about increasing access to hospice services for children. Awards with the leadership award from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation nonprofits. We did, and then we had for a little while Melissa Gilbert. You guys know Melissa Gilbert from Little House on the Prairie. Remember her? She was the board chair of CHPCC for a time and a national spokesperson for children. And she won the Humanitarian Leadership Award from the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization. Going through this, we started the waiver, the Nix-No Children's Hospice and Care Act, Partnering for Children National Marketing Campaign, Public Policy Education Day in California State Capitol, where advocates, families, all stakeholders visited the Capitol and visited with legislators. And then concurrent care for children, we worked on that, the Medi-Cal pediatric palliative care waiver, and all these different ways that children could access care, and the research and the public policy initiatives that would make all those things possible. And then we worked on POLST, which is physicians' orders for life-sustaining treatment, and pediatric curriculum around that. And one of the wonderful things we did was Hope Magazine. I would love to see that reignited. Hope Magazine was a national award-winning magazine that really brought to light in a very loving and impactful way the needs of seriously ill children. Going on, we did all these amazing things. And then in 2015, CHPCC merged with the Coalition for Compassionate Care in California. It was no longer an independent nonprofit. I wrote a paper about this merger from a nonprofit leadership perspective about what went right and what went wrong with that merger. And I'm going to send it off to you if you have time to read it. You can look at why that didn't work, because within that time frame from 2015 to last year, 2020, children's issues, the pediatric voice, lost its emphasis. It became something that was a side issue, not front and center. And so stakeholders said, wait a minute, we need our own coalition to address the specific needs of children because they're so different. So then in 2020, the Coalition for Compassionate Care, they realized that they really couldn't do pediatrics justice. And they then turned CHPCC, the intellectual property, and all of the things that we've done back to its founders, me and Devin. And that is when, at the time when our board, you all voted to fiscally sponsor CHPCC, because we don't have a 501c3 right now for CHPCC, so that it would give us an opportunity to take in donations and use our nonprofit 501c3 to take donations to begin to build back the Children's Coalition in California. So our current initiatives that we're working on, and I'm going to show you our steering committee too, the Pediatric Palliative Care webinar series. It is an incredible, well attended. We have about 150 to 200 people on a webinar. It's ppcwebinars.org. Maybe if I do this, we can take a look at that. I haven't done this before on a Zoom call. Let's see if it'll work. Look at that. Okay, yeah. So this is the Pediatric Palliative Care webinar series. You can see the content, take a look at the link, and you can see that this is a collaboration, and Jacob's Heart has been taking care of that in the interim. Now, let me see if I can go back to my PowerPoint. Wouldn't that be great? Okay, yeah, here we go. Okay, so we're doing an environmental scan of the availability of community-based resources. And here I can show you the map. This is working great, hopefully. Okay, so you see on this map, those little blue dots represent people or organizations who provide community-based services to seriously ill children in California. This is just the beginning. So if we look over here, we can zoom in a little bit. Okay, here we go. Here's Packard. Here's Lucille Packard Children's Hospital, Stanford, the palliative care department, which we have 2 members on our board. That's Harvey and Barbara. And then you can see Jacob's Heart's right here. And then you can see Hospice of Santa Cruz is right here. Coastal Kids is here. And then you can look through, here's UC Davis. So we're working on this. Now you can start to be able to see where services are lacking. And so then as we strategize around Jacob's Heart, like where would be the next place that would need a Jacob's Heart? We'll be able to learn and know from this endeavor, this environmental scan. So that's one of the initiatives that we're working on. Okay, here we go. And then we're going to do some, we hope to do some in-person trainings in Jacob's Heart. We've done that before. Those of you that were faculty on our trainings in the past, Harvey, Barbara, John, we've had some great in-person pediatric palliative care trainings. We had the concurrent care. So we'll start to reignite that. And we have more room now at Jacob's Heart with the McDill Center. So that's great. And then statewide advocacy will be able to address issues that come up for children, for children's healthcare that affects our children. And then we'll reignite the regional collaborative. So that's the plan, the current initiatives over the next couple of years. So now I can go to the steering committee. This is Kim Bauer. She sits on the steering committee. She's with Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego. She's also the medical director for palliative care for Blue Shield of California. And so we have a payer's perspective on the committee. And then Deborah Lotstein, she is the director of palliative care at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, USC. She's on the steering committee. And then Jim Santucci, he is a CPA, and he's also the executive director of CARA, which is a grief support program for teens, children, teens, families, and adults. And that's in Palo Alto. And we always call him the forever dad to Jillian. He's a bereaved dad. So he serves on the steering committee. And then many of you know Sherry Sager, who's the Senior Vice President and Chief Government Relations Officer at Packard. She's on our steering committee as well. And we've also, and then there's me, I'm on the steering committee, of course. And then we also have Trisha Potts. Many of you may remember Trisha from her innovation of accessible playgrounds. She's the founder of Leo's Haven at Chanticleer Park. You know, there's Tatum's Garden in Monterey, and she replicated that in Santa Cruz and is working on as a real advocate for families who have a child with special health care needs. She will be the project manager for the environmental scan that you just saw. When I flipped to that map, that's Trisha's work. So here are some options for discussion at the board meeting. So I showed you all the background about CHPCC to get you familiar with the why, like what is it and what does it look like? So here are some options. Now we voted to provide a fiscal sponsorship for CHPCC. We can look at that as a temporary bridge for CHPCC to use our fiscal use our 501c3 for tax deductibility. So Jacob's Heart could receive funds for CHPCC under our 501c3 for deductibility purposes only. And we keep separate books, separate bank accounts, and the CHPCC steering committee, who you met there, Deborah Lotstein, Kim Bauer, me, Jim Santucci, Sherry Sager, and there are other people joining the steering committee, and there will be a task force there. They would report to the CHPCC, to the Jacobs Hart board about the finances. And the goal would be that CHPCC, the coalition, would seek its own 501c3 and then become an independent nonprofit. So that's option one. Option two is that Jacobs Hart and CHPCC form a strategic alliance, and that blends us together more closely. So now Texas uses a similar model for this. And I had a long conversation with their executive director, Jan Wheeler. So they have the Texas Pediatric Palliative Care Consortium and Project Joy and Hope. So Jan Wheeler, the Texas Pediatric Palliative Care Consortium, that's a statewide coalition like CHPCC. They work on advocacy, education, and leadership. Project Joy and Hope is a direct service organization, very much like Jacobs Hart. Both organizations function under the 501c3 of Project Joy and Hope. They keep separate books, they have separate websites, but there's some convergence in their issues and some of the things that they do together. I'll show you a little bit more about that in just a moment. Then the third option would be that CHPCC actually becomes a full-fledged program of Jacobs Hart. And that would go under our community education program budget. Like I've said before, we've been doing the webinars. We've done several pediatric palliative care trainings already within our community education program. So we have that kind of set up, but what we would be doing then is adding statewide advocacy and leadership to that program. So CHPCC would essentially be one of our programs like Camp Heart and Hands, our team program, counseling, financial assistance, and then we would just have the CHPCC program. Same books, and the expenses would be classed under community education, awareness, and advocacy. And then they would have separate websites, but integrated. So that's a deeper, like, it's almost like a takeover. I don't like to say it that way, but it's like it becomes a program of Jacobs Hart. So we'll look at these. I'm going to kind of break these down a little bit, and then we can talk about them. So here we go with the fiscal sponsorship for CHPCC. So we have Jacobs Hart and CHPCC. The pros to this, the pros and the cons. We can talk about the pros and the cons. I just put some out here to spark the discussion. So pro would be that Jacobs Hart provides a temporary mechanism for CHPCC to reform since the Coalition for Compassionate Care offloaded their pediatric programs. It also, there's little risk to us, to Jacobs Hart, and we can have a discussion about that. Some of the cons are, like, why if we would choose this option, what would be against that would be that gives less certainty to CHPCC's initiatives, it gives us less certainty about the state of the services for children, the Jacobs Hart children, in terms of the larger picture of healthcare systems. There's also some missed opportunities, perhaps, for larger, broader engagement and funding. And larger, if we separate the organizations out, we might miss opportunities to engage funders and partners in larger initiatives. I've had some conversations and mentioned this to some of our funders, and they get very excited about it because it sort of deepens the meaning behind what Jacobs Hart's able to do. So we'll have some discussion about that. So in this model, we're basically providing a 501c3 temporarily for CHPCC. So the goal is, and this one is for CHPCC to become its own 501c3 and a separate organization from Jacobs Hart. So then our next option that I talked about was a strategic alliance. So that Jacobs Hart and CHPCC are strategically aligned organizations under the same 501c3. So the pros, cons, we can talk about this. Come up with some of your own, please. Pros, this leverages opportunities for both organizations. And I've been thinking a lot about our replicability. I know Bobby and I have been talking for some time about replicating Jacob's Heart in other areas. With this strategic alliance, it gives us more opportunities through the environmental scan and the needs assessment to figure out where and how that might work. So this would be a mechanism for Jacob's Heart's replication in the future. And the other thing is that Jacob's Heart has a voice at the table around training and policies that impact families. So we can discuss those. Some of the cons, I know we talked about, is this mission drift? This does widen our net regionally and diagnostically. So we would be then really expanding through CHPCC the services to life-threatening children, non-cancer. So there's a risk. What if CHPCC is unsuccessful? What if anything goes wrong there? Thought maybe there's risk. We can talk about what that might be. Are there any risks to our current programs in terms of time, energy, and resources? We don't want any of this strategic alliance to pull from the programs and services that Jacob's Heart provides. That would be, counterproductive. We want to make sure, and we can discuss this, that it boosts our programs and services. So we can have discussion about that. So the goal in this one is for CHPCC and Jacob's Heart to coexist as a fiscal and cross-program alliance with independent missions and programs that also, but some of those programs weave together and are shared, such as the 501c3 is shared, trainings, workshops, regional collaboratives, some of our research, and the webinars. Those would be shared endeavors. So then the third option, which we've talked about, is that CHPCC becomes a program, a permanent program of Jacob's Heart. So you can see here in this part, we have our Jacob's Heart, our organization. Here in this red circle are the direct support for families in the 4-county area. That's exactly what we are doing now. We're also, in the next couple of years, building out our counseling program, expanding our counseling program at the McDill Center, the new side of the building, for counseling and creative healing. And then we can also, in that circle, add CHPCC, the statewide coalition advocacy. Pros, adding a program simplifies the bookkeeping and fundraising. Jacob's Heart has a replication mechanism, again, like before, like the last one. And we also have an elevated voice at the table of training and policies. Those are pretty much the same. Extension of our current community education program, additional funding. And then the cons, again, mission drift. Does this endeavor fit into the overall mission? Same, kind of this, you have some of the same cons on this, the risk to overtake current programs that I talked about earlier. Now there's another thing here, like in the coalition world, I've been thinking about elevating Jacob's Heart as one provider within that coalition world. Some of the other leaders of other coalitions may have questions about it. That's why I reached out to Texas to see how they did it. And actually, Jan Wheeler has offered to come and talk with our board. If you have any questions, I may invite her to come to our board meeting and just give her take on how they do it and how they address these risks. So we can have some discussion about that. So I'm trying to anticipate some questions. Lori's time. So this has been a question. I've had talks with several of you about this, about how I would split my time. So since I've been involved with the coalition work for so long already, I know it really well. And since Jacob's Heart is in a stable position, I don't anticipate my workload increasing much. We have hired Trisha Potts to be the project manager for the coalition activities. And that is done through a grant from the Packard Foundation, and also Caroline's has committed to funding this. And Jan Wheeler from Texas, she says she spends about 10% of her time on the coalition work and 90% on Project Joy and Hope. I think it would be about the same for me. And then like really now with all this uncertainty, I mean, this is a time such as this. Well, yes, a time such as this. This is certainly an uncertain time. And it's in these uncertain times that children need our united efforts more than ever. And Jacob's Heart this last year we've been working hard to put ourselves in a strong position to make an exponential difference. And with our strength, the strength of our team, the strength of our finances, the strength of our board, all the strengths that we have, we could really leverage that to make an exponential difference in a time such as this. Families, healthcare providers, and others who love and care for seriously ill children have been hit hard by the pandemic. And Jacob's Heart's leadership in healing can be pivotal. What about the money? I anticipate the operating budget of CHPCC to be about $75,000 a year. And that will cover Trisha's project management time. It's a contract position for the needs assessment and some grant writing to bring in more funding. It's about 10% of my time would be billed to this. Website development, we need to create a website, and then some administrative fees. Income, anticipated grant income for this year is $75,000. $50,000 from the Packard Foundation for Children's Health is in the works right now. And then $25,000 from Caroline's nonprofit. Caroline's has been funding CHPCC and Jacob's Heart, both organizations, from the beginning, and Christy Licker has agreed to continue to do that. And there are also some revenue generating opportunities, which is the webinar. We charge for the webinars, and we will start to really generate some after costs. Some have about $2,000 a year in profit from that, and then the registration fees for any fees for trainings and workshops that we conduct at Jacob's Heart. Those are accredited, and providers get their CEUs and CMEs from those trainings, which is great. And so we should be in the black by the end of year one. So I don't think the financial risk is high. So then let's talk about this question at the board meeting. Who do we want to become? Who do we want to be at Jacob's Heart over the next 3 years as we start to plan for our 1, 2, and 3 years? And so those are kind of questions like, do we want to remain an amazing local organization that is dedicated to improving the quality of life for children in our community? We do that so well that I have no doubt that we will continue to do that successfully if we remain where we are, who we are, and what we are. But do we want to be an amazing local organization that is also a thought leader and change maker in the systems that impact those who love and care for children? And then those systems, obviously, that impact the children. Do we want to be an organization that is willing to speak out on behalf of those too little or too sick to speak for themselves? We do that already, but are we willing to do that to a broader audience in a time such as these? So these are things that we want to talk about at our meeting. So please bring questions. And I want to leave you with this thought. This quote by Forrest Whitcraft was given to me on a card from some partners, friends at Make-A-Wish during the first few months of Jacob's Heart. They sent me a card, and it's this. I'll read it, and we'll leave the rest for discussion. 100 years from now, it will not matter what my bank account was, the sort of house I lived in, or the car I drove. But the world may be different because I was important in the life of a child. And I think for Jacob's Heart, we have a strong bank account, we have a nice house, and we have a lot of really nice cars. But why we use those, what they're there for, is so that we can make the world better for children. And I just want to thank you so much for your service to this, and looking forward to a great year. And please watch all the videos, and I'll see you next week.